Right now, it's time for our first panel of the day, which is research. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Dr. Sharon Judge, Professor of Special Education at Old Dominion University, Dr. Tamara Kaldor, Assistant Director of the Erikson Institute's Technology and Early Childhood Center, and Dr. Amelia Moody, Professor at Watson College of Education at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. All of them have written so many books, book chapters, articles, presentations, that it would take, too much time. So you feel free to Google them and read lots of stuff that they have written, or to collar them in the course of the day, and they can tell you where to start. Anyway, if you'll all come up, and we're going to try to get started very quickly. And
Good morning. It was so great to hear Bill talk, because it really makes us realize how resilient our children are. Today I'm going to be talking about mobile media devices and young children. And mobile media devices are quickly becoming the preferred choice for children because of their screen size, their portability, their ability to stream content, their interactive capability, and also the decreased cost. I mean, it used to be that there was a digital gap, but nowadays that gap has really shrunk a lot. Because of the increasing popularity of mobile media devices among young children, mobile phones or tablets offer tremendous potential in reaching young learners with learning opportunities, including facilitating conversations between adults and other learners, encouraging motor skills, and providing that joint interaction that we know is really meaningful for young children. Okay, great. All right, so in this presentation, mobile media refers to phones, smartphones, video iPods, and iPads or tablet devices. Increasingly important is that mobile media can be designed to allow children to move in and out of overlapping physical, digital, and communicative spaces. In fact, kids today are not referred as digital kids, but mobile kids. With the popularity of mobile media devices, a new phenomenon has been observed in grocery stores, restaurants, crowded airplanes, known as the pass-back effect, where you probably have seen where an adult or a caregiver passes back the smartphone or the mobile media device to a child, either intentionally to play or unintentionally as a babysitter while mom or dad or grocery shopping or engaged elsewhere. Also, it can sometimes be referred to as a digital pacifier because it calms the child or engages the child while mom and dad are busily involved in doing something else. So when I talk about mobile media, this is what I'm referring to. Now, the use of mobile media devices. In a recent cross-sectional study of over 350 young children from urban low-income minority communities, Kabali and colleagues reported that 75% of the children under the age of 4 had their own mobile media device. Also, almost all of the children use mobile devices, and most started using the devices before age 1. So the pattern of use suggests early adaptation, frequent and independent use, and universal exposure to mobile devices. So even though we know that the guidelines are changing as far as young children using mobile media devices, in reality they are. And we need to face this, that this is just part of our reality, that young children are using devices, and it's easy for them to be using the devices. All right, so there's lots of benefits for mobile learning devices. The big one is the portability and ease. It allows children to use them at any time, anywhere, any place. They can accommodate different learning needs and different learning styles. Children can access information on their own, share information with one another, with families across the globe, with Skype, FaceTime, and they can take greater control of their learning. As Bill talked about, his kids loving the ABC apps, that they were able to take control of their own learning. And thus, personalized learning can be afforded through mobile media enhanced environments. So even with the potential mobile media devices, there are challenges. So the big one, of course, is the social challenges, including the amount of screen time that children are already exposed to in their lives, the difficulty of monitoring children's access to and sharing of inappropriate content, the health concerns that digital media may prevent children from getting physical exercise, and the likelihood that children may be distracted by the mobile devices. In addition, many parents and teachers question the educational value of mobile devices. Well, with over 80,000 apps labeled as educational on the iTunes App Store, little research validates their quality. And so only a handful of apps are designed with eye toward how children actually learn. So technological challenges include poorly designed mobile media devices, the screen size, the text entry method, and the battery life. Now, Hirsch-Paskett and her colleagues describe a first wave of the digital revolution of apps. And in this first wave of development, apps are usually just simply worksheets, games, and puzzles that have been reproduced in the e-format without any explicit consideration of how children learn. And some of the pitfalls they have identified, and they've categorized them as the fire alarm syndrome, in which, maybe a parent is reading an e-book to a child, but then there's a lot of distractions like, sounds going off or interactions going on between the characters in the story. So it's very distracting for the child. So they're not paying attention to the content. So it's like a fire alarm going off in a classroom where the children are distracted. Some apps are developed where they have all the bells and whistles, but they aren't mindful of the content. Some attempt to keep children engaged by constantly changing the screens, where one screen might have concepts about teaching shapes, the next screen would be teaching about math concepts, and then the next one would be teaching about early literacy. And we know that young children need repetition to learn best. So building on decades of the science of learning, Hirsch-Paskett and her colleagues had developed a set of principles to guide researchers, educators, and designers of apps, an evidence-based app development framework. In addition, these 4 pillars of learning can be used to evaluate and select the most effective existing children's apps that are on the market now. So apps designed to promote active, engaged, meaningful, and socially interactive learning, or the 4 pillars, emerge as truly educational. So an app called Words for Osmo, let's see if I can, I don't know if I've got this interactive, I'm not sure if it will bring that up. But anyway, if you clicked on this link, it would bring you to the website. It's an app called Words for Osmos, and it allows children to look at a picture on the screen showing an object and a series of shapes that represent the letters and the words of the object. And using real tiles, children try to guess the words and align the manipulable tiles to spell that word. The app also diagnoses progress through what is called reflective artificial intelligence, using a built-in mirror. So when children guess the word and spell it correctly, they are rewarded with on-screen feedback. So this type of app really encourages that active or minds-on learning. The educational quality of apps also depends on their ability to support children's engagement with the learning process. Now, engagement is deepened when an app responds to children's activities with meaningful feedback. So an app like Morton Sobotek's Pitch Painter, which is a big word, it was developed by Morton. With a poke of the finger, children can engage in musical development akin to drawing crayons on paper. So these kinds of user-driven, intrinsically motivating experiences are known to be deeply engaging for children, where they get both that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and feedback that we know is really important for young children. The third pillar, meaningful learning, means that active prior knowledge of a subject, and it requires children to solve problems or demonstrate proficiency in a content area to promote a meaningful learning beyond that rote learning. So these apps that are developed by Motion Math embed math concepts that link to children's real lives. The app world also invites a number of different social environments. As we know, it's really important that young children learn in a social environment, not only for language development, for all areas of development. So apps that engage multiple users, either in face-to-face interactions around the screen or using FaceTime or Skype, help engage that social interaction. And so an app that encourages that is Speak a Zoo, which allows children and animals to talk to each other. Now, when we think about critically examining apps for young children with disabilities, the research suggests that we need to examine apps first for their accessibility, because we know our young children with disabilities sometimes have disadvantages of accessing not only the mobile media devices, but also the content. Developers need to, and also us as early childhood professionals, need to examine the accessibility of apps through the lens of the Universal Design for Learning framework and the 7 principles of UDL. In addition, we must examine apps to determine whether they're aligned with developmentally appropriate practices. And to be considered developmentally appropriate, apps should be based on the child's interest, allow the child to make choices, and addresses the child's learning needs at their current stage of development, while also challenging the child to continue to grow. So if we think of that scaffolding, that the child starts at their level, but there is some opportunity to challenge them that they can continue to grow. So when an app has been determined to be accessible and developmentally appropriate, then we need to begin to consider whether the app includes features that allow customization to meet the unique learning needs of each child. And this research is based on work done by Moore and Travers that was published recently in the Young Conceptual Children Journal. So more information about looking at what criteria to use when evaluating and examining apps. In this article, they have an excellent checklist. They have excellent criteria to look for when selecting apps, especially for young children with disabilities. Now, when we look at strategies, I'm just going to talk about this real briefly because I know the next panel is going to talk about this more. But some strategies for integration of apps would be where parents and children can read developmentally appropriate ebooks together. That includes sounds and interactive activities, video modeling and social stories through the use of mobile media devices, help children who need the modeling appropriate behavior. And so these apps help to develop social stories just in time. And so if a child is going out on a playground and needs help in developing appropriate social skills with their peers. You can develop an app through their Social Stories app. There's also an app called Dexteria, where children are required to pinch and tap objects that move around the screen. So this helps really develop fine motor skills at the same time as content skills. And of course, we know that there's lots of speech-to-text apps, as our first keynote speaker talked about with her son. So what are the implications for research? Well, a lot needs to be done. As I said, we have a lot of apps out there, but not very much research has been done on them. So researchers need to continue to conduct empirical studies of the design, content, and use factors that optimize the educational value of children's apps. Parents and educators looking for children's educational apps would benefit from more detailed information about apps, content, and development, and how apps end up on that top educational list. There's lots of websites that are good websites, but they list, like, you know, the 5 best apps, the 5 best top educational apps. Well, what was the criteria that was chosen to select those apps to be on those lists? Evidence that children learn from well-designed educational apps signal a new challenge to produce quality content and provide guidance for developers. Educational app developers should consider explicit design features that engage multiple users, because we know that young children need that social interaction. So specific suggestions include designing with the child's interest in mind, incorporating content that is more developmentally appropriate, and enabling co-users to create content together. This is a list of websites that are good for educators, parents, when they need to look for apps. A lot of them are designed just for typical children, but a lot of them are also for children with special needs. And some of them also have criteria or guidance as far as how to select different apps. And if you have any more questions, this is my email address. Please email me, and at the end of the panel, we'll be open also for questions and answers. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be in a room full of educators because we love learning from you, and I hope that you'll be really active today in the Q&A. I think they're pulling up my presentation now. So a little bit about me while they're pulling things up. I'm Tamara Kaldor. I'm the Assistant Director at the Technology and Early Childhood Center at Erikson Institute. We're a graduate school in child development, which means we lead with our child development knowledge first when we're talking about technology in early childhood, and we're highly regarded for our work with NACCE, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and helping to write the position statement with the Fred Rogers Center on technology use for young children, and for our thought leadership and helping curate the best resources for educators, and also in our professional development. So I was asked today to talk about what do we know and what do we want to know. Screen time and accessibility in early childhood, and really thinking about not just children with special needs, but all children as well. And I'm really passionate about this. I have a daughter who has communication disorder and a nephew who is on the autistic spectrum. And I know that research only tells us a small portion, that families, and Bill was so great at telling his family story, and again, educators play a key role in telling us what we don't know. And I want to open with a couple of provocations. So who drives innovation? Is it the people that make this? Or is it the children, the educators, and the families that are using these tools and learning how to use them meaningfully? Is it disability that's driving innovation? Are we helping to make change because we're demanding from all of these developers that they make different settings, different accessibilities, different pieces for us as we go. So what do we know, right? Why was April 3rd, 2010 such a game changer? This came on the market, right? I think when we all got this, we thought, whoa, this is a pretty big game changer, right? But then this showed up. And inclusion, which I'm so passionate about, and I bet a lot of us in the room are too, is that we're thinking about who suddenly gets to go to school with a screen, right? Big changes for our families. And I don't need research to tell me that, because all of a sudden we're seeing it all around us. So we're going to show a little video of a school that I worked with in Illinois. And these principals came to me, they'd heard me do a speech and a talk really about technology in early childhood. I want to go back. And they said to me, we're tired of going to IEP meetings and telling our secretaries that they need to give us some extra time so we can go into our offices and cry, because our meetings are focused on what children are not capable of. And I thought, since we always like to see, right, some things in action, and I was asked to bring some video, that this would be a great one to start with. You guys ready? Okay.
District 59's mission is to prepare students to be successful for life. That means something a little different for students in the ELS classroom than it means for their typically developing peers.
Debbie, what do you want? Debbie, what would you like to eat?
I want to eat cereal. I want to eat cereal.
So, you want to eat?
I think one of the most important developments in the infusion of technology into our ELS classrooms is that until maybe 6 or 8 years ago, much of the...
I like that rhyme. That's like your umbrella rap song. Did you make up your umbrella rap song?
Last spring, we spent some time with the entire ELS staff talking about what successful for life means for our students. You know, think about how you would answer this question if you were a mom, one of the kids in the program. Then we got answers like this. I want my kids to know what they enjoy doing and know how to get that stuff. I want my kids to have friends. I want my kids to have a job that they like. I want my kids to be able to solve problems when they have them and to know where to go if they need help. We all need that. It's no different for the students who are coming through the ELS program. I would describe where we are now in terms of using technology in the ELS classrooms as just the starting point. Where I would love to see technology use go for our students who have disabilities is that we make much richer use of what's commercially available and that we blur the line between technology use for people with disabilities and the general population.
You know, it's really neat to see the students interact with one another.
Let's walk. Walk, make sure you're stuck. There we go.
Very good. I think for 5 of the day. And then let's get some bricks.
I like that rhyme. That's like your umbrella rap song. Did you make up your umbrella rap song?
Last spring, we spent some time with the entire ELS staff talking about what successful for life means for our students. You know, think about how you would answer this question if you were a mom.
It's no different for the students who are coming through the ELS program. I would describe where we are now in terms of using technology in the ELS classrooms as just the starting point. Where I would love to see technology use go for our students who have disabilities is that we make much richer use of what's commercially available and that we blur the line between technology use for people with disabilities and the general population.
Technology in the ELS classroom as just the starting point. Where I would love to see technology use go for our students who have disabilities
is that we make much richer use of what's commercially available.
Different for the students who are coming through the ELS program. I would describe where we are now in terms of using technology in the ELS classrooms as just the starting point. Where I would love to see technology use go for our students who have disabilities is that we make much richer use of
room, right? We're trying to think about how do we blur the line with already available. And I think we heard some great examples even in Bill's presentation on some apps that are very much commercially available about what to do, right? These are things that are happening, but what's missing we know as well. So I'll talk a little bit about why they pull up the presentation again, is teacher training, right? So we know that there's not enough professional development. We know that this is not in service. And when we think about this position statement, so we've got this beautiful policy piece, right, guiding us. I want to focus on the empowerment and giving the child control to think about what are we thinking about in that effective use, and what are we thinking about as we go forward in some of our research and what we're looking at. So the Tech Center at Erikson, we have some new data out that really supports much of what you heard Sharon discuss. I'm not going to go too much into depth, but we recently surveyed over the summer 1,000 parents, right? And now we know suddenly things have shifted a little bit, right? In a big way, actually, maybe not so little. 85% of parents allow their children to use technology in the home. That 79% of parents use technology with their children for up to 2 hours a day. Were they telling the truth? We don't know, right? 86% of parents are satisfied with their children's technology use, citing benefits of positive child development, literacy, and technology skills. So where have we gone on that scare tactic? And remember, we have some new screen time guidelines out from the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we've gone, and we helped advise on some of these guidelines as well. So we've gone from more descriptive to prescriptive, right? Parents have knowledge that this is about also reality-based, about what parents and families are really doing with tech. Joint engagement and co-viewing. So using media together improves learning. Video chat. Under 2, you guys. Suddenly, screen time isn't off limits, and a lot of that credit needs to go to researcher Lauren Myers. There was an NPR article highlighting some of her work recently, and what the AAP and NPR did in some of their highlighting of her work is they left out a key piece. Here's what Lauren discovered, and those of us that know our child development and lead with that, this is going to make perfect sense. We already knew this. What do kids learn best when they're on those FaceTime and Skype calls with grandma, grandpa, and all of our family, and maybe mom and dad when they're traveling, is, well, if you have the same object that the child has, including a book, and you're reading it together, their comprehension and understanding goes up, right? But we know children learn best through relationships, and also, again, that makes sense from what we know about children in play and research. So parent media use and the role as media mentors. Parents and the AAP are acknowledging play this critical role. And this certainly means so much, as we know parents, especially special needs children, play critical roles as well in not only selecting and advocating for what their children need, but also in spending time with them to use those tools meaningfully as they're learning how to use them to communicate, share their ideas, and use their voice in different ways. So suddenly we have a big shift. No screens under children for under 18 months except for video chat, right? 18 months to 2 years, it's okay to introduce high-quality media if you watch with them. But how are we going to help parents identify what's high quality, right? That app store is a very busy place. We just heard about it from Sharon. Now we've got 2 to 5 years. We're still sticking with that daily limit time. And this puts educators, I think, in a tough position. So I'll be curious to see what you're thinking as you go forward about, and about in some of the Q&A. What does that mean when we're using technology in school, when we're using assistive technology? How do we deal with that and the AAP guidelines? And then really still about what does this look like for sleeping and waking and all the other health concerns that we have. And we also know, of course, that the Department of Ed recently released their big policy brief on early learning and educational technology. And it shares many of the same things. Everyone's starting to agree it works well. So what's happening in the research world? I just came back from SRCD, which is the Society for Research on Child Development, and they had their first ever special topics meeting on children and media. So what are they all talking about? Because it takes a long time for their papers, as we know, to get published. We're looking at 3 to 5 years. So virtual reality and augmented reality for social stories. This is some interesting news, you guys. So augmented reality, meaning where that person looks like they're in 3D with you for social stories. Whoa, the results of some of those early studies are really exciting to see. Children were able to comprehend, understand, and transfer that knowledge very quickly to the real world in different ways even than we're seeing with ebook social stories. Executive functioning research and technology, big on assessments, is coming at us very soon. Ebooks, lots of research on ebooks is going to be coming out in the next few years, on a lot of it very positive. Video games, a lot of focus on video games. Lab time. So here's the big deal, right? Lab time. Most of the studies are being done in labs, not in homes, not in libraries or museums and those informal learning centers. And what does that mean when we're reading those research studies, right? So part of what we've done also is we have an early career research fellow, Katie Pasiga, who's with the Fred Rogers Center and with the Tech Center this year. And she culled all of the research and all of those articles and practitioner tips articles that you see. And we have 757 entries so far. And those have been published since June 2011 to present day. Only 8 to 10% of studies coded address populations that were identified as either special ed, English language learners, or low SES. Only 0.02% of entries coded were longitudinal in nature. So what's that tell us? A lot of questions still, right? We don't know some of the long-term pieces. And I want to point out, what about play? So we've been talking a lot about these so far this morning, but what happens when we think about robotics and early coding and tangible tech, and especially for children with special needs? Because now we're on the floor or on a table and pressing buttons and looking at things in different ways. And there's really not much research on that. And what's coming next? I'm going to skip this video because we're short on time and I want to respect our pieces, but I will send out a link, and it's a Sky News piece, and it really talks about how technology is being used in a hospice setting for young children in the UK. And one of the big highlights that I really love showing of this video is where you're projecting using the WeConnect type systems onto the floor. And when does it again happen that we start thinking about this is not the future of tech, right? We know that eventually screens will disappear. And when we think about children with special needs and we're thinking about all the environments that families and children are in, when do we think about flipping that projector and making a play space on the floor that all children can be in classrooms and other settings, and using some of that technology in different ways? So, and we know so much about families as well. I don't want to leave families out of this conversation because they're another area that we need more research in. And really thinking about that families take on roles as lifelong educators and learners together. And parents are powerful teachers for their own children. And we need more research in that area as well so that we can keep empowering parents. So how can tech support whole families, neurodiversity, inclusion to empower children, parents, and educators? There's a reason the money is behind there, because in research, it's all about the money. And I think many of us, but I'll be curious to see also too, where do the educators in this room want some of that money to go towards? What do you feel is missing? What do you want to know more about? And you need to have a voice in that conversation as well. Thanks so much, everybody, and I'm going to hand things off.
Hello, everyone. I am Amelia Moody, and I am from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I am the Center. Oh, sorry. I am the director for the Center for Assistive Technology at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I do a lot of research on electronic storybooks, and currently I'm doing some work in robotics that I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to talk about digital storybooks first. There seems to be a trend in what we're talking about, which is great. So I'm going to get a little bit more in depth about them. So there is research showing that they're very effective and some research showing that they're not effective. And some of those mediating factors have to do with adult mediation during the activities, how the technology is being used. But there definitely seems to be some benefits and trends. And so the first thing is enhanced engagement. I think we can all agree in this room that what we've seen so far is you give child technology and they get engaged and excited about it. And so that is something that we can utilize to try to enhance literacy development. We also know that once we put a book onto a tablet or our laptop, it's more accessible for our students. So those with disabilities that couldn't access it before now have this increased access. There is a lot of research to show that it increases comprehension. There are certain hot spots in tech animations that go along with the story that support the text, and therefore it helps with the comprehension. Promoting print referencing, there's wonderful highlighting of the text so that you can follow the print from left to right. And oral language possibilities. When you get up to the elementary age, the electronic books turn to the book will be read to you, which is scaffolding. Then you read the book to yourself. You can auto-record yourself, and then you can listen to the story from your own perspective. And so those are some interesting features that are popping up. And then vocabulary supports. There are certain electronic books that allow you to click on buttons to show you the definition or to have a video that acts out what the word means, and that's very helpful for English second language learners. And so some important features I just wanted to point out is we do know that adult monitoring or mediation is very effective for these stories, especially with young children, as was mentioned earlier. So we can keep them dialoguing about the story and keep them focused with joint attention. Dictionary functions, again, are very helpful. Hotspots are specific spots where you can point on the animation and it will act out for you. We do know that there are hotspots that are not helpful. Those are distracting because they don't support the story content. So looking for storybooks that have specific features that limit just play areas that have nothing to do with the text is very helpful. And adult mediation helps students to move to the next page and continue to move effectively versus stop and play a lot if it's not related to what you're trying to learn. There's those animated features and the highlighting of the text, as I mentioned before. So this is a little video of just an example of a living book. It's called Raz Kids, and it's another program, and it has you, again, you can read backwards, you can read it again, and then eventually you have to take a comprehensive and vocabulary test at the end. And again, this videotapes monitors as well. Say while we're working on this, the trend is that we see they're effective, but there's not that aggregation of research, and this is what we're really looking for as researchers. Can we show effectively that research is supporting the technology that we recommend? And so one of the challenges that we face in technology is that the technology is coming out faster than we can possibly research it. And so work is being done right now to sort of join developers and researchers to try to catch up and make sure that we can support evidence-based practices. But this is some of the stuff I'm doing on robotics research. Is there a way to go back to the slide?
terrific. So one of the other things that we are doing over at my university is we have a STEM cooperative, and we started running STEM camps for children with disabilities. And so we started with, we call it Spectrum, and we got children in, and it had science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programming. And what we noticed is it was very helpful, and we built in a social stories concept within there. A social program within that, so they had to come together after they did the experiments and talk to one another about whether it worked or not. And this is more high-functioning students. So we develop after-school programs, weekend programs, and camps that are specifically designed to teach individuals with autism. The incidence rate is 1 in 68, and so we have tons of people in our population that are coming out that need jobs, and we know that the chances that you'll get employed with a disability are lower than for traditional students. So we are looking at humanoid robots now that are designed to reach students on the spectrum. And so some of the things that we know are people with autism spectrum disorders have trouble with facial features and processing them. And so that's one of the reasons that you might see students look away or have trouble comprehending things that typically developing students can comprehend. They attend to details versus the overall picture. We know that they have difficulty understanding intentions, emotions, and feelings, and so there's a lot of programs that you'll see in apps to try to teach people when someone's happy, sad, you name it. There's issues maintaining that joint attention and that engagement during conversation, difficulty regulating their behaviors, and communication deficits. But we do know that they love technology, and they enjoy interacting with technology. So these are examples of some humanoid robots that are out there. You'll see Casper on the bottom left, Milo on the right, and then center, it's a Now robot. And these robots have human-like features, and they have the ability to record what they're seeing. So you can see what the child is interacting with and how they're interacting. They have digital cameras, voice recognition, ability to reach and grab things, move around. So they are entertaining for kids. Some features are that limited eye movement. So that's a feature that students with autism cannot process. Tactile sensors, they have human traits, arms, legs, hands, feet, delivers clear and simple communication, and senses when children begin to get frustrated and react. They can also display emotions, but it's in a more simple way by just the eyes of the robot. And so in our program, we did a study that looked at children interacting with iPad games versus using human robotics to see if engagement changed. And what we saw is engagement stayed very, very high with both because they're both technology, and we know kids love technology. But when it came to communication, when they were on the iPad and there wasn't adult mediation, it was rather low because some of the apps and games that we play, we know, don't require communication. So when it was in the human robots condition, we had students, we programmed the robots to play Simon Says, something simple. And so they had to say, Simon says, and you have to wait for the robot to respond before you can continue. So he says, okay, and then you say, sit, wave, stand, whatever it is, the command. And then they did it. And what we saw is, did the video disappear? Well, you saw Isaiah earlier, and he said to the robot, wave, and he waved back. And so he was one of our star pupils who adored the robots. And one of the things that we saw that was interesting enough is we provided, after each session, the students started to kind of, and this is not evidence-based right now, but just an observation that I did not take data on, they started to bond with the robots. And so they started to ask if they did their work with the robots, if they could then sit down and play with them for a little while afterwards. So the next thing you knew is the robots were dressed up and they were singing karaoke with the kids, and they kind of brought their own play dimension into it. So I do think the general
vibe that I see is technology is a really engaging tool that we know can assist students with disabilities, but we have to be particular about what we choose, making sure that it has features that support the skill that we're trying to get students to learn. And so this is some more, more recent research, and a lot more is coming out on electronic storybooks now. And so we're getting to see what kind of books for who, when, which are all complicated questions that we have to answer. So that is my research. Thank you. Yeah, we can. Sure. It's very short.
And then we have time for a couple questions. Okay, does anyone have any questions?
You spoke about robotics being kind of newer technology. Is any of this being used in the schools currently?
Yeah, I think some of the lower tech robotics are being used in schools, and they progress. So there's robots for tiny, small children that just simply you program it to go 2 spaces forward, a space sideways, to kind of move through a maze of some sort. And they develop from there. And then the higher tech robots are those humanoid robots that will actually interact and are designed specifically for the autism population much of the time.
I can add, so because we work with schools so much and with educators, so if you're looking for things that are out on the marketplace already, there's learning resources, which many educators know already because you're getting lots of supplies from them, has a new robot mouse out called Code and Go, and you can get the model without the maze and all these other plastic pieces that eventually the kids get rid of anyway for about $20. And it's very simple, and it comes with a little set of command cards, and we've actually seen again, no research attached to it, but just from practitioners' feedback in the field, teachers are loving it, especially for dual language learners and children with special needs for inclusion, because it's really bringing the class together often and helping some children to be the experts, whereas they're often treated as having deficits. Another, which is a little bit pricier, is Bee-Bot, which kind of looks like a bumblebee, and that comes from a company named Terrapin. And then there's, you can go up to, of course, Wonder Workshop has Dash and Dot, which are these blue guys. Dash looks like he's got a big eye. On top of him are some pieces, but some of those early coding toys and really thinking about, again, inclusion and who you can empower in your community to be a leader can be great.
And I should add that once the students finished with our robotics study, we actually started to teach them programming because it's icon-based, and they were able to kind of teach the robot to do things that they wanted, so it kind of encouraged them to proceed with technology.
Yeah, I would add, and I just thought to realize, so PBS Kids just recently came out. I haven't even gotten enough to play with it, but a tablet that's only a PBS Kids tablet. But they have Scratch Junior, which is an early coding program out of MIT and Tufts University. And so what I would say about Scratch Junior through the PBS version that some kids may really love is they incorporated a lot of their favorite characters from familiar PBS shows.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from one of our virtual participants. For any panel members, how can technology help those with multiple or severe disabilities?
Well, number one would be the speech-to-text. Also, you can do where they gave us the handout of the picture symbols. You can also have those on an iPad or a device, so they can point to a picture which can actually speak for them.
Yeah, I think even things about, so you can make social stories now that can be sent home very easily or can stay potentially in the classroom, or you can empower families if you're working especially in early intervention. So there's an app called Book Creator. It's not great for if you're someone that needs to send things for parents to use, but for children can now help make and tell the story of their day. So I have a background as a developmental therapist, and when I was in private practice, I used to end my sessions, and I've now helped teachers do a lot of this work by, so what did we do today? And putting together and sequencing together that social story that then goes home, and then parents are able to read. And so you can even use a tool like PowerPoint so the children can't voice record, but you can save that as a PDF, and it can quickly go out at home. And you can have children taking pictures of what they're doing. And again, they're making, think about all that high executive functioning that they're doing and communication skills when they're writing the story themselves. And there's also an app called ChoiceWorks and ChoiceWorks Calendar that, again, I think is really empowering for families. And the prices on those keep dropping. I mean, I've seen them lately for like $4.99. And thinking about, again, that you can pull these things up now on your phone. I mean, for a parent to be able to have a social story on their phone is so powerful. When we think about that joint family engagement, and we think especially about our children with special needs, and even anyway in early childhood, what parent doesn't say, so what'd you do today at school, right? And there's silence, or, you know, you heard about something from very early on, but now you can have a visual that a teacher or somebody else sent home very quickly at the end of the day, and suddenly everyone has a voice at the dinner table. Everyone can talk about what I did. And really thinking again about how am I using the tools already out there in different ways to engage and help communicate.
Also, just for infants, the aspect of cause and effect, like what Bear talked about when he first gave the iPad to Will and he immediately took to it. I mean, that was probably just, you know, if I hit this, something happens. And we know that, you know, the first level of development is teaching that cause and effect.
Okay, we have time for one last question, another from our virtual participants. How do you deal with robot durability for children who want to interact physically with the robots?
We were really successful. They are very expensive, and so we just taught them the rule. I mean, we used social stories to teach them the rules of how we can hold and what we can do with robots and what we can, and we taught them to hold them like a baby at their head because that's where most of the expensive technology is, and gave them a little bit of arm space between them and the robot. But they learned very quickly because those were their friends, and these were higher functioning kids, but those were their friends, and they were very protective over their friends, and therefore we didn't have any issues, surprisingly enough. But it is a concern, I'm sure.
Okay, one final question. Any thoughts on technology use with infants?
Yeah, I can go. So I think in terms of technology use with infants, let's go back to those AAP guidelines, some of the NACI position statements and other things, and focus on the engagement. So, right, we're not leaving children alone, especially very young children alone with devices and screens, and really thinking again about how am I using this tool to engage with a child to increase vocabulary, to work on some of that joint eye engagement. Is there also power, though, that we know for parents who are really we all have time where we need downtime and time to snuggle with our kids, right? I'm a working mom. I come home, we're tired. And thinking about those moments, I always think I'm ready to start a campaign sometimes called Cuddling with the Screen or Cuddling Up with Your Tech. Because we know that when young children, even infants, are in a parent's arm and everybody's feeling relaxed and good, that lots of great little signals and hormones go off and children feel loved and attended to. And so thinking about our infants too, do we also help and support families by giving them permission and reminding them to describe what's happening on the screen, to get that language development going, to make those moments interactive, and to take that time to cuddle, to spend time together, and engaging in different ways. I have a background in floor time, which is a relationship-based model, and we always talk so much about cuddle time. It's floor time, right? That's therapeutic for everybody, and feeling good together as well are some reminders. And again, those video chat moments. Remember, sometimes if you're a working parent, think about packing those bags and bringing the same ball that you have at home, or asking grandma and grandpa to go to the library and get the same book and reading that together.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking our research. And that was a great segue into our next activity, Activity 2, which is about app exploration. And so we have 17 or 18 iPads. We'll distribute one to table. And on the back are a list of apps that are preloaded onto the iPads. The apps, there are 10 of them. And as you can imagine, I had hundreds to choose from because I have hundreds in my toolbox that I really like. So I selectively chose 10. There's an explanation of why they're there or what feature about it I would like, and so it's an opportunity, whether you know them or not, to kind of explore them. And one of the things I forgot to do about your activity sheets is they're all divided and kind of organized in the same way. There's an explanation about the topic of the activity. There's kind of a thought to ponder. There is the end goal, why we're doing the activity, what we'd like to accomplish. On the back are some key takeaways, some resources, and then how to do the activity. So these are meant to be reusable. And so those iPads should be coming out, and I'll be walking around if you have any questions.